Guess we'll begin this morning. There's going to be a lot of Bible reading this morning, and it may not be as long of a class as what we're used to, but I still think we're going to get into some good information. So right off the bat, we've got chapter 29. We had been talking about the different nations being judged, and it's been a focus on Judah as a whole. And then here in chapter 29, it gets a little more specific. It boils down to a city that's not doing what it's supposed to do. So when we look at chapter 29 and when we go through these first several verses, it kind of reminds me of back in chapter 1, where the people were going through the motions of the worship service, and they really didn't have any pure intentions behind what they were doing, but they were doing it, I guess, would it be called out of a formality? Would that be the correct word to use? So why don't we dive into this, and then I want to do a little bit of background history here to get a better understanding as to what is being talked about. So here in verse 1 it says, "Woe to Ariel, the city where David dwelt." So right off the bat, we have a new name being used. And this is more of I guess it would be more of a symbolic name to a certain city. So I guess the easy question is, what city do you guys think we're getting ready to talk about? That's right. So when you look at this word Ariel, well, right off the bat, I do have a cross reference that says Jerusalem beside of it. And when you look in the lexicon, it has a meaning of, let's see, a lioness of God is what it said, or a altar hearth. So Ariel is symbolic for Jerusalem, and then the verse goes on to say, "Add ye year to year, let them kill sacrifices." So, and we're using this word Ariel, which is also an altar hearth where sacrifices would have taken place. So when you think about the people here, and they're going about their services in more of a formality, and you think about back in chapter 1 where they were going through all this and they didn't have any pure intentions behind it, but they were doing it just to do it. What we're building up is basically, it's kind of like people today. People today go through the motions of the worship service, but they may not have any pure intentions behind the motions. So in their mind, they're thinking, well, I'm showing up every Sunday. I'm partaking of the Lord's Supper. Don't really want to be here, but I'm here just because my brethren, maybe they'll give me some breathing room, they'll get off my back. And that person's going to think, well, I went through the actions. Surely I'll be fine when it's all said and done, even though my heart just ain't in it. That's no different than what was happening with the people here in Jerusalem back in Isaiah's day. They were going through the motions, their hearts weren't in it, and basically Isaiah's saying, you know what? All of this empty religion, all of this non-caring attitude, impurity of the hearts, you're going through the actions, but guess what? That's not going to stop God's judgment that He's got in store for you. And that goes along with what Jesus teaches us in the New Testament. Jesus teaches us that one of the most important things for us is to have a true love for His commandments and to do things out of a pure heart. And that's something God's always expected. So, verse 29, chapter 29, verse 1, Woe to Ariel, the city where David dwelt. Add ye year to year, let them kill sacrifices. So, we're talking about this year to year and these sacrifices, and we're thinking about these feasts where they were getting together and they had turned that into just having a good time, and they didn't really truly gather together for the right reasons. Well, one of the verses we can go to kind of learn about what maybe these feasts would have been that were going on year after year is we can go to the book of Deuteronomy, and we can get an idea as to what Isaiah may be talking about here. Let's see here in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 16 and verse 16. It was Moses instructed them by saying, 3 times in a year shall all thy males appear before the Lord thy God in the place which He shall choose, in the feast of unleavened bread, in the feast of weeks, and in the feast of the tabernacles, and they shall not appear before the Lord empty. Every man shall give as he is able, according to the blessing of the Lord thy God, which He hath given thee. So, for us today, when we read verse 1, we may not be up to par as to what the sacrifices and what the whole year by year may mean, but these guys knew. They know what Isaiah is talking about. They know that they're considered the city where David dwelt. They know that this is pinpointed to them. And they know that their actions and their purity of heart has lacked. And they're just going through the motions. And like I said before, that's a lot of people today are guilty of that in the Lord's church. So he goes on to say, he says, Yet I will distress Ariel, which we're now establishing is Jerusalem, and there shall be heaviness and sorrow, and it shall be unto me as Ariel. And I will camp against thee round about, and I will lay siege against thee with a mount, and I will raise forts against thee. And then in verse 4 it says, And thou shalt be brought down, and shalt speak out of the ground. Thy speech shall be low out of the dust. Thy voice shall be as of one that hath a familiar spirit out of the ground, and thy speech shall whisper out of the dust. So, to fully get an understanding here as to what's really taking place in this present time that Isaiah is addressing this issue, we really need to go back and look a little bit of history here. And the beautiful thing about the Bible is we have this recorded history for us that we can go back and see why the mourning is taking place. Who are the players that's involved here that's going to bring this judgment about on the city of Jerusalem? And let's see here. So what we can do is we're going to go back into the book of 2 Kings. And we're going to get the background here. We're going to get the application as to what was wrong with the people and what is truly taking place here to bring such sorrow. What's truly taking place when it says, I will raise forts against thee. And if we go to the book of 2 Kings, and actually probably want to start in 2 Kings chapter 18 to get a better understanding. And basically what we're going to learn is Isaiah is speaking to these people and basically pointing out their failure. Their failure of a true worship to God is what they're being guilty of. And their failure of their faith in God and how they went out and sought these alliances with other nations. So, this is going to be a little lengthy, but I think maybe we can split it up. But I'd like to get the full context into reading that chapters 18 and 19 so that we can get a better understanding of these first 4 verses here in Isaiah chapter 29. So, in 2 Kings chapter 18, we've got some interesting things I want us to stop and look at as we go through this. But in chapter 18, we can split this up in 10 verses apiece. I'll go ahead and do the first 10. It says, "Now it came to pass in the 3rd year of Hosea, son of Elah, king of Israel, that Hezekiah, the son of Ahaz, king of Judah, began his reign." So here we have a key player that we need to keep in mind. The current king of Judah is going to be this gentleman by the name of Hezekiah. So he's a key player here. Verse 2 says, 25 years old was he when he began to reign, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name also was Abi, and the daughter of Zechariah. And verse 3 it says, "And he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord according to all that David his father did." Now verse 4 is interesting. It says, "He removed the high places and brake the images, cut down the groves, brake in pieces the brazen serpent of Moses had made. For unto those days the children of Israel did burn incense to it, and he called it Nehushtan." So, does everybody remember this brazen serpent?
It was on a pole, and those that looked up at it that had been bit by a serpent would be healed.
So what did it, what was the meaning behind that, the symbolic meaning of this brazen serpent? What did it symbolize, I guess, for the people when they looked upon this serpent, this brazen serpent?
It's like salvation, it's deliverance.
A deliverance. So when we look, that's absolutely right, Clark. It's a symbol of deliverance for the people. And that's found back in Numbers 21, 5 through 9, when you want to look at the actual event. So just like people today, they take something that was intended to have a good meaning behind it, and they start to worship it. So verse 4 says the people started to actually turn it into an idol, and Hezekiah ended up having to destroy it. And, you know, this thought just came in my mind, like as we're talking right now, but think about the rainbow. So in the Bible, what did the rainbow represent?
God wanted to fill the earth with water.
So the rainbow was a symbol of a good thing. And lo and behold, people today took the rainbow and now they've tried to turn it into something way wicked, just perverted. So just like, is it Ezekiel? Just like Ezekiel writes, there's nothing new under the sun. People today, their pervertedness, turning the rainbow, which was a good symbol, into something wicked. People back then were turning the brazen serpent into something wicked. They started worshiping it. So, man left up to his own imagination it's not going to end well. And we see that through history. So, here we have some issues taking place with the people. They started worshiping the brazen serpent of all things. And in verse 5 it says, he trusted in the Lord of Israel, so that after him was none like him among all the kings of Judah, nor any that were before him. For he clave to the Lord, and departed not from following him, but kept his commandments which the Lord commanded Moses. And the Lord was with him, and he prospered, and whithersoever he went forth. And he rebelled against the king of Assyria, and served him not. He smote the Philistines even unto Gaza, and the borders thereof, from the tower of the watchman and the fenced city. And it came to pass in the 4th year of King Hezekiah, which was the 7th year of Hoshea son of Elah, king of Israel, that Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, came up against Samaria and besieged it. And then in verse 10, and at the end of the 3 years they took it, even in the 6th year of Hezekiah, that is the 9th year of Hoshea, king of Israel, Samaria was taken. And it says, and the king of Assyria did carry away Israel unto Assyria, and put them in Halah, and in Habor by the river of Gozan, and in the cities of the Medes, because they obeyed not the voice of the Lord their God, but transgressed his covenant, and all that Moses the servant of the Lord commanded, and would not hear them, nor do them. And then it says, now in the 14th year of the king of Hezekiah did Sennacherib, king of Assyria, come up against all the fenced cities of Judah, and took them. So, we're now introduced to our second key player here, in which we've touched on a little bit in past studies, but we have Sennacherib. So we have Hezekiah, king of Judah, and now we have Sennacherib, king of Assyria. Assyria's been the powerhouse we've been talking about. Assyria's the ones that God's using to judge his people. So we're getting a little bit of background here as to the two key players and the nations that are involved. And then it goes on to say, and Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent to king of Assyria to Lachish, saying, I have offended. Return unto me. That which thou puttest on me will I bear. And the king of Assyria appointed unto Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. Okay. So, here it is, Assyria saying, hey, look, Hezekiah, you want some safety here, you're going to have to pay me. Give me some of your gold. Give me some of your treasures. And in verse 15, Hezekiah gave him all the silver that was found in the house of the Lord and in the treasures of the king's house. So he paid up. And in verse 16, and at that time did Hezekiah cut off the gold from the doors of the temple of the Lord and from the pillars which Hezekiah, king of Judah, had overlaid, and gave it to the king of Assyria. Okay, so Sennacherib wanted them to pay up so that for his safety. Hezekiah paid him. And then in verse 17 it says, and the king of Assyria sent Tartan and Rabsaris and Rabshakeh from Lachish to King Hezekiah with a great host against Jerusalem. Now you may be thinking, now wait a minute. Sennacherib told them, pay me some tribute, pay me some of that treasure, you'll have some safety. Hezekiah did it, and now all of a sudden in verse 17 we're seeing the Sennacherib actually sent down and went up against Jerusalem. And they went up and came to Jerusalem, and when they were come up, they came and stood by the conduit of the upper pool, which is the highway of the fuller's field. So, when you think about that, and you think about the wickedness and Assyria being the heathen nation that they are, they're in this for their own gain. They don't have a care in the world for these people in Jerusalem. They're just trying to get as much as they can get. So what happens here, just like today's world, Jerusalem starts giving them some money. Well, the king of Assyria is going to look at that and be like, man, you gave me that much. What else you got in there? So guess what? The arrogance, the pridefulness, the greediness of King Assyria, he wanted more. So he saw that they had something, but he knew they had something else in there too. So now he's going up against Jerusalem. So this goes right back to really why God is so upset with the people putting their faith in these heathen nations. Instead of putting your faith in God, knowing that He is sure and just and honest, He will be your protector and your shield. He will not let you down. Here we have a prime example. Judah, Jerusalem, sending some tributes, trying to get a little bit of safety here. And guess what it did? It backfired. Assyria wanted more. They have no loyalty to God's people. They're in this for themselves. And let's see here. Man, I just kept on reading, didn't I? I'll go on and get to verse 20 then. So when they had called to the king, there came out to them Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, which was over the household, and Shebna the scribe, and Joah the son of Asaph, and the recorder, and Rabshakeh, said to them, Speak ye now to Hezekiah, Thus saith the great king, the king of Assyria, What confidence is this wherein thou trustest? I'm just going to keep reading for a little bit more. And let's see, Thou sayest, But they are but vain words. I have counsel and strength for the war. Now on whom dost thou trust that thou rebellest against me? Now behold, thou trustest upon the staff of the bruised reed, even upon Egypt, on which if a man lean, it will go into his hand and pierce it. So is Pharaoh king of Egypt unto all that trust in him. But if ye say unto me, We trust in the Lord our God, is not that he whose high places and whose altars Hezekiah hath taken away, and hath said to Judah and Jerusalem, Ye shall worship before the altar in Jerusalem? And verse 23 says, Now therefore I pray thee, give pledges to my lord the king of Assyria, and I will deliver thee 2,000 horses, if thou be able on thy part to set riders upon them. And verse 24, How then wilt thou turn away the face of one captain of the least of my master's servants, and put thy trust in Egypt for chariots, for horsemen? And then verse 25, I want us to look at this a little bit. It says, Am I now come up without the Lord against this place to destroy it? The Lord said to me, Go up against this land and destroy it. So, back in verse 22, the question was, did Hezekiah trust in the Lord? And, here we are in verse 25, Rabshakeh claims that God sent Sennacherib to Jerusalem to basically place judgment on it. So, this has got to be an eye-opener here for the people, because they were going about thinking that they were doing everything they needed to. They were going about thinking they were making good decisions. We got this guy up north. He's a bit of a bully, and he's telling me to pay him some money here, and I'll be okay. Well, I'm going to do that. And next thing you know, it backfires, and that bully up north decides he wants a little bit more. So now the whole question here is, did Hezekiah trust in the Lord? And then we have this revealance of Rabshakeh that in verse 25 it says, "And I am come up with the Lord against the place to destroy it. The Lord said to me, go up against this land and destroy it." So the reason I'm looking at verse 25 is because when we get a little further into Isaiah chapter 29, we're going to come about some judgment language around verses 6 and verse 7, to where this is why we needed to take a step back to understand who the players are. Who is going to be this judgment that's going to come upon the people? Who is it that God is using to put out this punishment, this discipline that the people were going to need to go through to learn their lesson? Let's see here. In verse 26, it says, "Then said Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, and Shebna and Joah unto Rabshakeh, Speak, I pray thee, to thy servants in the Syrian language, for we understand it, and talk not with us in the Jews' language in the ears of the people that are on the wall." But Rabshakeh said unto them, "Hath my master sent me to thy master and to thee to speak these words? Hath he not sent me to the men which sit on the wall, and they may eat their own dung and drink their own piss with you?" And Rabshakeh stood and cried with a loud voice in the Jews' language, and spake, saying, "Hear the word of the great king, the king of Assyria. Thus saith the king, Let not Hezekiah deceive you, for he shall not be able to deliver you out of his hand. Neither let Hezekiah make you trust in the Lord, saying, The Lord will surely deliver us, and this city shall not be delivered into the hand of the king of Assyria. Hearken not to Hezekiah, for thus saith the king of Assyria, Make an agreement with me by a present, and come out to me, and then eat ye every man of his own vine, and every one of the fig tree, and drink ye every one the waters of his cistern, until I come and take you away to a land like your own land, a land of corn and wine, a land of bread and vineyards, a land of oil, olive, and honey, that ye may live and not die, and hearken not unto Hezekiah, when he persuadeth thou, saying, The Lord will deliver us. Hath any of the gods of the nations delivered at all this land out of the hand of the king of Assyria? Where are the gods of Hamath and Arpad? Where are the gods of Sepharvaim, Hena, and Iva? Have they delivered Samaria out of mine hand? Who are they among all the gods of the countries, and have delivered their country out of mine hand, that the Lord should deliver Jerusalem out of mine hand? But the people held their peace and answered him not a word, for the king's commandment was saying, Answer him not. Then came Eliakim the son of Hilkiah, which was over the household, and Shebna the scribe, and Joah the son of Asaph, the recorder, to Hezekiah with their clothes rent, and told them the words of Rabshakeh. So, verse 37, we have some connection here. So verse 37 says that the torn clothes of Hezekiah, does this not remind you a little bit about what we just read here in verse 4 in Isaiah 29:1, where it says, And thou shalt be brought down, and speak out of the ground the speech of the low of the dust. The voice shall be as the one that hath a familiar spirit. Out of the ground the speech shall whisper out of the dust. Let's see here. I meant to go back up to, I just followed through with it though. Let's see, verse 2. And yet I will distress Ariel, Jerusalem, and there shall be heaviness and sorrow. So heaviness and sorrow. All of this is building up back in 2 Kings chapter 18. All of this was started because of the people and their impurity with worshiping God. All the way to taking the brazen serpent and making an idol out of it. So now the people will be judged. They will be disciplined. And Assyria is going to be used to be the one that comes down and does this. All of this is building up that we just read in 2 Kings chapter 18. And now we have in verse 37, Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, which was over the household, and Shebna the scribe, Joah the son of Asaph the recorder, Hezekiah, with their clothes rent. The sorrow is happening, the humiliation, the grief. All of this is now starting to happen. Just like we're reading about here in Isaiah chapter 29 in these first 4 verses. The sorrow and the heaviness, it shall be unto me as Ariel, Jerusalem. Distress will be in Jerusalem. He's going to raise up forts against thee, Jerusalem. All of this is happening here. So what I'd like to do, so that you guys don't have to listen to me read, I'd like us to look at 2 Kings chapter 19 to see a little bit more of how all this is playing out. And then we'll jump back into doing our discussion here in Isaiah 29. So I'm not asking anybody to read the whole chapter, but if you guys are comfortable doing 10 verses apiece or 15 verses or whatever you feel like reading, you can read until you don't want to read anymore. Does anyone want to read?
I'll read 1 to 20.
Okay. All right.
And it came to pass, when King Hezekiah heard it, that he rent his clothes and covered himself with sackcloth and went into the house of the Lord. And he sent Eliakim, which was over the household, and Shebna the scribe, and the elders of the priests, covered with sackcloth, to Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amoz. And they said unto him, Thus saith Hezekiah, This day is a day of trouble, and of rebuke and blasphemy. For the children are come to the birth, and there is not strength to bring forth. It may be the Lord thy God will hear all the words of Rabshakeh, whom the king of Assyria and his master has sent to reproach the living God, and will reprove the words which the Lord thy God hath heard. Wherefore lift up thy prayer for the remnant that are left. So the servants of King Hezekiah came to Isaiah, and Isaiah said unto them, Thus shall ye say to your master, Thus saith the Lord, Be not afraid of the words which thou hast heard, with which the servants of the king of Assyria have blasphemed me. Behold, I will send a blast upon him, and he shall hear a rumor, and shall return to his own land, and I will cause him to fall by the sword in his own land. So Rabshakeh returned and found the king of Assyria warring against Libnah, for he had heard that he was departed from Lachish. And when he heard say of Tirkakah, king of Ethiopia, Behold, he has come out to fight against thee. He sent messengers again unto Hezekiah, saying, Thus shall ye speak to Hezekiah, king of Judah, saying, Let not thy God in whom thou trustest deceiveth thee, saying, Jerusalem shall not be delivered into the hand of the king of Assyria. Behold, thou hast heard what the kings of Assyria have done to all lands by destroying them utterly, and shalt thou be delivered? Have the gods of the nations delivered them which my fathers have destroyed, as Gozan and Haran and Rezeph and the children of Eden which were in Thelasar? Where is the king of Hamath and the king of Arpad and the king of the city of Sepharvaim, of Hena and Ava?
All right, hold on a second, Mark. So, if we look back at verses 6 and 7 of what Mark just read. So it's just like a bunch of these heathen nations that come in and God uses to place judgment on his people. And it makes me think of Rome and how wicked and evil they were when they came in, and God used them in the first century to put judgment on the people, and how evil they were about doing that. Just like the Babylonians, all the torture, the deaths, those are things that they'll have to answer for. That's not God's way of just flat out murdering and torturing people. But these heathen nations, that's what they did. They came in and they did that. Assyria came in and they did this in the most violent of ways, which is not going to make God happy. So we have here Isaiah the prophet talking with the king, and basically he's telling Isaiah, yeah, they're coming down in here and they are going to try to besiege the city. But in verses 6 and 7, he's kind of giving some assurance to Hezekiah that, they're not just going to get away with these kind of activities, okay? Sennacherib is going to answer for what he's doing and the way he's going about trying to put this judgment on the people. Okay, he's not going to get a get-out-of-jail-free card for coming down and murdering people and torturing people. He's going to answer for it. And when this chapter ends, we'll actually see he does answer for the violence that he came down into the city and put upon the people. So just because God allows another nation to come in and place judgment doesn't give them the freedom to come and do whatever evil deeds they want to do without having any consequences. That's not going to work. So, I guess, Mark, you can continue on. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Hezekiah received the letter at the hand of the messengers and read it. And Hezekiah went up into the house of the Lord and spread it before the Lord. And Hezekiah prayed before the Lord and said, O Lord God of Israel, which dwellest between the cherubims, thou art the God, even thou alone, of all the kingdoms of the earth. Thou hast made heaven and earth. Lord, bow down thine ear and hear. Open, Lord, thine eyes and see. And hear the words of Sennacherib, which have sent him to reproach the living God. Of the truth, Lord, the kings of Assyria have destroyed the nations and their lands, and have cast their gods into the fire, for they were no gods, but the work of men's hands, wood and stone. Therefore they have destroyed them. Now therefore, O Lord our God, I beseech thee, save thou us out of his hand, that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that thou art the Lord God, even thou only. Then Isaiah the son of Amoz sent to Hezekiah, saying, Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, that which thou hast praised me against Sennacherib, king of Assyria, I have heard.
So, let's think about that when we're dealing with prayer. Here it is, Hezekiah is really wanting to put his trust in God and be somebody that's considered faithful to God. But yet the majority of the people are not like that. But we have an instance here in verse 20 to where Hezekiah prays to God. He saith, the Lord, thus saith the Lord God of Israel, that which thou prayed to me against Sennacherib, king of Assyria, I have heard. Yet another instance as a sidebar note, God hears the prayers of those who are faithful and who have not been separated from him. So basically Hezekiah is praying that something be done about these heathen people and their violence and how they're going about coming down into Jerusalem and to Judah and the things that they're doing. And he's praying to God that God do something about this. And what we're going to see here is, just like I said before, it doesn't give them the right to kill and torture people just because they've been allowed to come in to do a judgment on God's people. We're going to see through the rest of this chapter that the the end results for Sennacherib is not going to end well. So, anyone want to read the rest of that chapter or split it up between two of you? Okay.
This is the word that the Lord has spoken concerning him. The virgin, the daughter of Zion, has despised thee and laughed thee to scorn. The daughter of Jerusalem has shaken her head at thee. Whom hast thou reproached and blasphemed? And against whom hast thou exalted thy voice and lifted up thine eyes on high? Even against the Holy One of Israel. By thy messengers thou hast reproached the Lord, and hast said, with the multitude of my chariots I am come up to the height of the mountains, to the sides of Lebanon, and will cut down the tall cedar trees thereof, and the choice fir trees thereof, and I will enter into the lodgings of his borders, and into the forest of his Carmel. I have digged and drunk strange waters, and with the sole of my feet have I dried up all the rivers of the sieged places. Hast thou not heard long ago how I have done it, and of ancient times that I have formed it? Now have I brought it to pass that thou shouldest be to lay waste fenced cities into ruinous heaps. Therefore their inhabitants were of small power. They were dismayed and confounded. They were as the grass of the field, and as the green herb, as the grass on the housetops, and as corn blasted before it be grown up. But I know thy abode, and thy going out, and thy coming in, and thy rage against me. Because thy rage against me, and thy tumult is come up into my ears. Therefore I will put my hook in thy nose, and my bridle in thy lips, and I will turn thee back by the way by which thou camest. And this shall be a sign unto thee: ye shall eat this year such things as grow of themselves, and in the second year that which springeth of the same. And in the third year sow ye, and reap, and plant vineyards, and eat the fruits thereof. And the remnant that is escaped of the house of Judah shall yet again take root downward, and bear fruit upward. For out of Jerusalem shall go forth a remnant, and they that escape out of Mount Zion, the zeal of the Lord of hosts shall do this. Therefore thus saith the Lord concerning the king of Assyria: He shall not come into this city, nor shoot an arrow there, nor come before it with shield, nor cast a bank against it. By the way that he came, by the same shall he return, and shall not come into the city, saith the Lord. For I will defend this city to save it, for mine own sake, and for my servant David's sake. And it came to pass that night that the angel of the Lord went out and smote in the camp of the Assyrians 184,500. And when they arose early in the morning, behold, they were all dead corpses. So Sennacherib, king of Assyria, departed, and went and returned and dwelt at Nineveh. And it came to pass, as he was worshiping in the house of Nisroch, his god, that Adramelech and Sharezer, his son, smote him with the sword, and they escaped into the land of Armenia, and Esarhaddon, his son, reigned in his stead.
So at the very end of all this, Sennacherib's own sons assassinated him as the end of the result of how wicked and prideful and arrogant, how greedy Sennacherib was, and how cruel and evil he was, and how he went about coming into the land of Jerusalem and the land of Judah. God wasn't going to allow that to go unpunished. So Sennacherib answered that, and his own sons ended up killing him. Verse 34 is a little interesting. So it says, "For I will defend the city to save it for mine own sake and for my servant David's sake." So there is a covenant that was made with David. And basically, we had Sennacherib here was basically blaspheming the name of God. But in 2 Samuel chapter 23, we'll turn there real quick, and then we'll end class after this. But 2 Samuel chapter 23. kind of goes back to the fact that God does not break his covenants or promises. Chapter 23, and it's just a couple verses here. Let's see, verse 1. Now these be the last words of David, David the son of Jesse, and the man who was raised up on high and anointed the God of Jacob with a sweet psalmist of Israel, said, the Spirit of the Lord spake by me, and his word was in my tongue. The God of Israel said, the rock of Israel spake to me. He that ruleth over me must be just, ruling in the fear of God. And then I think it's verses 4 and 5. It says, and he shall be as a light of the morning when the sun riseth every morning without clouds, and the tender grass springing out of the earth by the clear shining after rain. And, verse 5. Although my house be not so with God, yet he hath made with me an everlasting covenant, ordered in all things and sure, for this all is all my salvation and all my desire, although he make it not to grow. Not to grow. So this is David speaking of the covenant that God made with him. And then in 2 Kings 19, we have it said, for I will defend this city to save it for mine own sake and for my servant David's sake. See, there's a covenant there that was made with David, and God's not going to break that covenant that he had going on. And he's not going to allow Sennacherib to come in and be so evil and cruel and torturous to these people and not have to answer for it. He had no right to do that. So we're gonna probably, let me end with telling you a couple chapters to maybe look at on your own time to get even more detail about this whole event. And I'm going to say, when you get time, read Isaiah chapters 37 and 38, because it's going to rehash just a little bit more about what we've been talking about here. And pretty sure there was something else I wanted to mention to you guys, but I guess I've probably gone on enough unless I see it real quick. Yeah, real quick, and this was supposed to be a short class, but back in 2 Kings chapter 18, and when you were looking at verses 15 through 17, when we were talking about the tribute that was being paid, a little more background as to what took place during this same event would be if you wanted to go over to 2 Chronicles and look at chapter 32. You'll get some even more info on what was taking place there. And you know what? Well, I'm not going to read anymore. So we've gone on long enough for class. Make a note of 2 Chronicles chapter 32. Look at probably the first 10 verses or so, and you'll get even more detail. So we'll go ahead and end class at this time, and I assume there was no questions or comments. All right. Thank you, guys.